Okay, so now I do a little ad read for the sponsors, but we're bringing some of the online components here to the internet, or the in-person components here to the internet. So we're trying something new. We're gonna have a couple of these live little talks, little videos, things like that. Matt is going to kick us off strongly in this new endeavor. And all right, so Matt, I will let you take it away.
All right, no pressure. Let's get this shared real quick, and then let's go. Ian, am I good tech-wise?
Yes, you look good.
Beautiful. Hey, everybody.
Great slide.
So thank you very much. It's a template. I was very proud of it. I just typed Titan in there. So I'm Matt. I am the partner and technical director at Titan. I'll actually be talking a little bit later, but right now is my sponsor slot for Titan. The good thing is you all know I talk really fast. That's awesome. So I'm just going to talk to you about 3 things really quickly and then cut it off to the actual talk. So number 1, a little bit about Titan. We are a development consultancy that works in Laravel, Vue, React, Native Script, Vue, React Native, Tailwind, Inertia, all these different types of things. We try to do really freaking excellent work. And that's kind of an internal idea that we have where we want to do everything really, really good. And it's not just because we're arrogant or because we're nerds. I mean, half of us, well, we all nerds, but half of us are like computer science degrees, but half of us are like liberal arts degrees. We're just trying to do really good work for the people we're working with, for the world. And we're also trying to be like really excellent to the people around us. You may know that I am obsessed with Mr. Rogers, and he's like my favorite person ever. And there's a Mr. Rogers doll right there that you may or may not be able to see. And so we're just trying to like be kind to other people and be good to other people and be excellent to other people while also doing really good work. So we have things where we're trying to be excellent to the community and to our employees by offering things like 20% time. And we're trying to do really excellent work for our clients, doing rescues or greenfield apps where we're building them from scratch or legacy migrations or whatever. So what I want from you in this first slot is if you do need freaking excellent work, hit us up. I know a lot of people who are developers, but if your company needs really good work, let us know. And number 2 is just be excellent to each other. I mean, more importantly than anything else is that if Titan can do anything in our industry, it is to help it be a better and more welcoming and more friendly space. So mainly just be excellent to each other. Okay, so that's my number 1. My number 2 is a year ago at my talk, I introduced something called OnRamp. And it's finally live-ish. We're still working on it. We're still adding resources and stuff like that, but it's got a real design. It's got all this kind of stuff. So if you don't remember what OnRamp is a free resource with none of its own actual educational content. The idea is if somebody says, hey, I want to learn how to program, and you say, I'm a Laravel programmer, and they say, where do I start? This happens to me all the time, and I don't really know where to send them. And so I say, well, learn HTML here and learn CSS there, learn Git there, learn object-oriented programming there. So the idea is if you are coming from WordPress, if you're coming from a front-end developer, or if you're coming from a brand new programmer, you sign up for OnRamp, and it walks you through external resources, so not our own internal resources. And it says, first thing you should do is learn HTML and CSS. Here's a whole bunch of places to go do that. Once you're done, you should have completed these skills. I can write HTML, I can write CSS, and you check them off in the app. And then it's like, all right, here's what's next. Passes you off to the external resources. And so it's kind of walking them through that process. We have lots of plans later, but right now that's what it is. And we're going to launch it kind of officially as of today, although we're still working on it. So things I want from you on this slide. Number 1, if you need it, sign up. Let us know what you think. Is this working well for you? Share it with your friends and all that kind of stuff. But number 2, most importantly to the audience of this particular thing, is help us make it freaking excellent. Submit ideas and resources. If you go to onramp.dev, you should see that little thing pop up. And if you click on that dev page link right there, it's going to take you to a little Discord chat we have. It's been kind of dead recently because we took a whole bunch of work internally for Titan. But now that we're launching it, we get to bring it back to the place where we're asking for help from the community. And so you can click there and you can see where it's all open source in GitHub. You can see that. You can join our chat, whatever else. And then the third thing I want to talk about is Larabels. So Zuzana Kunskova is a wonderful human being. If you've watched my YouTube, you've seen us pair together a little bit. And her goal with Larabels is basically to create a new space that is creating even more community and is creating even more opportunities for collaboration. And this specific community is a place for women, gender non-binary and trans folks to get together and create not an exclusive, separate community, but a new space where we're bringing together people who, well, she's bringing it together people who may not have been connected or together in the past. So she's still building it right now. If you want to learn more about it, you can check out yesterday's Laravel meetup. And she talked about it at more length right now. Things I want from you in this one. Number 1, just go to larabels.com if you are in that group and sign up. Number 2, follow her on @larabelsphp. And number 3, she doesn't have a lot of sponsorship opportunities right now, but if you just go to her zuzana-k.com, there's actually a link that says donate, and you can actually go buy her a coffee. That's it. Thank you all so much, and I will see you a little bit later at my talk.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Matt. That was really great. So that's a great way to kick it off. I like it. All right, we will see you back in a few. Okay. Gonna bring Jonathan in. Here he comes.
Hello.
Hello, sir.
How's it going?
Great to have you back.
It's good to be back.
All right, we are tight. We are on schedule, amazingly-ish. So take it away.
I will be a solid 30, but I will do
That's fine.
my absolute best not to go over.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. All right. Let me start by sharing my screen here. All right. Desktop 1. All right. How we doing? Ian, we good here?
Yep, that's good.
All right. Hello, everyone. It's good to be back again. I am here to speak to you today about a special project of mine called Inertia.js. So Inertia is a tool that lets you quickly build modern single-page React, Vue, and Svelte apps using classic server-side routing and controllers. So if you know anything about me, if you've been following me for any time, you know that I'm a big fan of monolith applications. So I'm a big fan of frameworks like Laravel, which are monolith frameworks, similar to like Rails or Django, where you have a single project and a single repository where you create routes, you create controllers, in those controllers, somehow you go off to the database to get some data with Eloquent and Laravel, and then you take that data and you pass it down to some sort of template. Typically, that's Blade. So I really, really like building applications in that way. The challenge is if you've ever wanted to build a single page app, or if you've ever wanted to work with these modern client-side frameworks like Vue and React or Svelte, the story to develop with them is a lot more complex. Typically, this is how it goes. I want to build a Vue app or a React app. Well, now you need to split apart your Laravel app from your client-side app. You got to have a totally separate repo, totally separate project, totally separate hosting for each one of them. Laravel becomes your API. Maybe it's a REST API or a GraphQL API. And now you're dealing with things like API versioning, and you're dealing with things like authentication between the two. Maybe you're messing around with OAuth 2. And you're dealing with client-side state management. Maybe there's Vuex, and there's just all these different pieces. And honestly, like that can make sense for a certain number of applications. Absolutely. I think we've seen that, and you can build wonderful applications that way. But what I was not happy with was that became the requirement. I wanted to be able to build a Laravel application that didn't need an API, that didn't need 2 separate hosting projects, that didn't need 2 separate repositories. And I wanted to be able to build a classic Laravel monolith, but still be able to take advantage of these modern JavaScript frameworks like Vue or React. And what I really wanted to do is I really just wanted to take one piece of Laravel away, which is Blade. And don't get me wrong, I love Blade and it has its place, absolutely. For example, if SEO is a concern. But really, other than like that, I wanted to get rid of Blade and I wanted to replace it with basically page templates, Vue templates, or React templates. I work in Vue, so everything during this talk is going to be Vue. And I wanted to be able to build out applications that way, because in the apps that I was building, I was just constantly reaching for Vue because of the functionality that modern JavaScript frameworks give you, the reactivity, just all this awesome stuff that you can do with these frameworks. But I didn't want to have to build an API, and I didn't want to have to like go all in on this entire paradigm shift. So that's really where Inertia came from. So that's kind of high level. I thought maybe for the next 25 minutes or so, we would hack on this little demo app that I put together, and we'll make some changes to it. And I think this will hopefully illustrate a little better, kind of what Inertia is and how you work with it and how easy it is to work with, and how you can build really, really awesome applications with it. We'll still like really just loving the classic monolith approach to building web apps. Okay, so right now I only have one page here, and that includes this layout. So the layout's from Tailwind UI. Thanks, Adam and Steve, for that. And so I have, if I show you, I'll just jump into the code here. Let's get rid of some of this and get rid of this. Sorry. And yeah, let's actually start in the routes folder here. So it's a totally standard Laravel application in almost every way. So very comfortable. If you're familiar with Laravel, you're going to be very comfortable here. And it's got one endpoint, which points to a dashboard controller, which has an index method. And that's for this particular dashboard page. And this is kind of the first difference you're going to see compared to like a regular Laravel application. Maybe in a regular Laravel application, you'd return a view here, which would return a dashboard blade view. But with Inertia, it's a little bit different. Instead of returning a view, you return an Inertia response. And the value you give it is the name of your view or your JavaScript page component. So in this case, this is going to be dashboard.view. So that's what the first parameter is, similar to, again, a blade file name. And you can also pass in data as well, just like you would with the view helper, except with Inertia, the data is treated as props. So properties on these client-side components, page components. All right, so that's kind of what the most simple controller endpoint looks like. Let's go take a look at the resources directory here, and you'll see in here that we have a views folder that has one blade file. So you still need a single blade file at a minimum. And what this does is it gets rendered the very first time you visit an Inertia site. And this is used to output the HTML document in the body. You load any of your assets such as CSS and your JavaScript. And then you include this little @Inertia blade directive helper. And all this does, it's really just a shorthand for this. Let's look at the source here. All it is it outputs a base div with an ID of app and the default page information, which includes the page name and the props. So what happens here is this gets outputted, and when on the first page load, this is the div that Vue or React or Svelte gets booted into. All right, so other than that, you won't have other page views, but you might have other blade files still, like my Inertia apps often do. You'll have email blade files, or you'll have blade files for PDF generation, different things like that. So you'll still use blade, but by and large, your pages are not going to be in Vue. All right, so then as far as the actual JavaScript setup, it's very simple. Webpack is literally just stock Webpack. I've removed the CSS from this just because I'm using a CDN for this example, but it's like no Webpack changes to get this up and running. All the configuration is done in your app.js file. And this is basically boilerplate that you can find on the client side setup of the Inertia website, initializing the app. It's basically just this content right here. And what this does is it just imports Inertia Vue. It imports Vue, boots it up, gets that base app ID, that root div, and then it renders or it boots up Vue in that div, passing through the default Inertia app as the first component, and it passes it two important props. So the first prop is the initial page data that we saw in that data page attribute in the HTML. And the second one is the resolve component callback, which basically just takes the page name. So it basically takes the name of the page component, in this case it's dashboard, and it just tells Inertia, well, where do I find that? So you just pass it, and it's saying here, this, when you give me the name, well, it's going to be located in pages, where you can see, and you can see that, right? Dashboard.view is in the pages directory. So let's not worry too much about this. I just wanted to give you a really quick sense of kind of what it takes to get an Inertia app up and running and configuring it. So I think what I'm going to do next is we're going to go over to this app, and what we're going to do is we're going to create a users page, because I want to show you an example of a page that gets some data from the database and outputs it into one of these page components and passes that data through as a prop to that component. So this page doesn't exist right now, 404 not found, but I do have an SQLite database set up with 25 users in it. So we're gonna get that. So what we'll do is we'll go to our routes file here, and we're just gonna duplicate this route, and we're gonna make this the users endpoint, and we're gonna point this to the users controller. Now let's go here and do PHP artisan make controller, users controller, model equals user. All right, if I did that right, we should be able to go in here when it's ready. There it is. And now we have our users controller set up for our user model. Okay, so this is easy. Just like before, we just got to return an Inertia response here. But first, what we're going to do is we're going to get our users from the database. So this is just pretty basic, eloquent stuff. We're going to get all the users, and then we're going to return an Inertia response. And that we're going to put that Inertia response, we're going to create a new user/index page component. So I'm using a subfolder here now, and we're going to pass through some data. And the data we're going to pass through is just the users. So this is very, very typical. Like if you've worked with Blade, this is very normal. You get some users, you get some data, and you pass that data to the component or to the page template. The only difference, and this is an important difference when working with Inertia, is the data that you're passing is not like hidden server side. This is going to go client side to your client side page component. So you got to make sure that you don't send sensitive data here, and you want to limit the amount of data you send, because this is essentially kind of like your API now. You want to send the minimal amount of data over the wire as possible. So if we do a map on here and we say, well, we only want the ID, we only want the name, we only want the email, and we only want the role, we're now limiting all the data that comes back from this endpoint to only these 4 attributes. So that's like a key difference compared to, say, working with Blade. Okay, so now let's go and actually create this page. So let's go back to our JavaScript directory here. Under pages, we're going to create this new folder, right? We're going to create the users folder, because I like to organize it this way, and I often organize my Blade files in the same way. And we're going to create a new file, and this is just going to be called index.view. And now if we go, I actually have this stubbed out because it's way too much HTML to do during a 25, 30-minute talk. So I'm just going to paste this in. And again, this is just a bunch of HTML from Tailwind UI with a bunch of static content put into this. And I've wrapped it in the layout component that I have, which I think I might have failed to mention at the beginning, that this dashboard component has a layout component around it, which is this file right here. And you can see in this layout component that I have this little slot, and that's where the page component renders. Okay, and yeah, I think I may have even failed to show you the dashboard component entirely. So this dashboard component is just what we saw right here, right? Hi Laracon, and it's got this layout that renders the layout from Tailwind UI. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so let's go down here now and let's hit save. So this actually builds. Let's go to the users page. And undefined users, guaranteed I was going to make that mistake. I always do that. And now we have our users page, and you can see all this content that's just static, just roughed in HTML, but this really nice layout, right? That lists all the users. So what we want to do is we want to update this page to take the users that we're getting from the database and passing through to this page component, and we want to actually output them on this page. So just like any view component, the way you get data into the component is with props. So we'll just go like this. We'll say props, and we'll say users, and that's going to equal an array because we have an array of users. Okay, and then we're going to go up here and we're going to remove all these rows, and we're going to get rid of them all except the very top one, which is Taylor. And then we're going to do a loop here, v4 user in users, and then we're going to do a key here, key equals user.id. Instead of displaying Taylor's name every time, we're going to do user.name. And email, user.email, and user.role. And if I've done this correctly, we hit save here, we reload this page, and boom, we're getting our 25 users from the database. It's that simple. And if we go and look here, we can see in the view tab here that under the index page component, which falls under the inertia component, we have these 25 users coming back as a prop. And if we look in the first one, we can see that we have 4 attributes: email, ID, name, and role, which those are the 4 attributes that we specifically set in our users controller. So this is how easy it is to get data from a controller to a client-side page template with Inertia. So maybe in the past, what you've done to get data into a page component is somewhere in this thing, you'd have some sort of mounted hook where you load some data over XHR from some API endpoint. With Inertia, you don't do that. It's literally the endpoint renders, it hits the user index page, the data gets passed to the component, and it's immediately available. Okay, so to this point now, we have only looked at what it takes to generate these pages, but we still don't have a single page app. We still are not in SPA mode here. So I want to show you how to do that next. And the way you enable SPA mode in Inertia is by creating Inertia links. So let's go into our layout file here. So we're going to look at all these menu items here, right? And we're going to replace all these links with Inertia links instead, okay? So I'm going to just replace them. Okay, now they're in Inertia links. And if I hit refresh and I reload here and we look at these links, we can see that they're still just anchor links, right? Like there's just still regular plain old links. The only difference now is that when you click on one of these links, Inertia will intercept that click event, prevent a full page reload from happening, go off and get that data over Ajax, and then dynamically swap out the current page component, so say the dashboard, with the new page component. So let's go to the network tab here, and we'll hit reload here, and we'll see we get the initial page document, right? So that's the first page load that brings back the HTML document. And now we're gonna hit users, and you'll see how quickly that loaded. And it was because it was loaded over Ajax, over XHR. And if we look at this request and we inspect it, we can see that that request did not return HTML. Instead, Inertia behind the scenes detected that it was an Inertia request, and instead of returning HTML, instead just returned a JSON payload. And in there, it included the same page object that was included in the base HTML that we saw in that data page attribute, except now it's coming back as JSON. And that includes the name of the new page component, which is our user index page component, and any props. And if we look in here, we can see all the 25 users coming back as the props that then get automatically passed to that user index page component. And the reason this works is because because Vue and React and Svelte have this concept of dynamic components. A dynamic component being a component that can be swapped out with a new component with its own properties. And then when Inertia does that swapping, it also updates the history state. So we get the back and forth. So in a lot of ways, Inertia is almost like a routing library, a client-side routing library, except with Inertia, you don't define any of your routes client-side. They're all defined in Laravel, just like you would with a traditional monolith. So it makes for these really silky smooth page transitions. And it's because we don't have to do a full page reload every single time. And because Vue is then maintained, we're not rebooting Vue every single time. We're just booting Vue once, or we're just booting React once. It makes it really, really quick. So just one little thing here, I'll show you if we were to be on a slow connection. So I'm gonna slow it down to slow 3G here and click on the users page. You'll see that if it starts taking a while, it'll throw this little loading indicator, which you've definitely seen in other SPAs before as well. So that kind of just comes with Inertia. Okay, so that is create Inertia links. So now let's take another look at a kind of a common problem that you might run into if you're building kind of a more modern application like this, and that's scroll regions. So imagine we're on the users page here, right? And we've scrolled right to the bottom, and now we go and click on the dashboard, and we're like, oh, we want to go back. When you click back here, where do you expect to be? Well, we're going to end up right back at the top of the page, but where I would expect to be is at the bottom. I want my context to be maintained because that's going to make for a better user experience. If I go back, I want to see where I was previously. And the reason why this doesn't work is because this particular layout from Tailwind UI doesn't have the whole document as a scrollable area. Instead, it has this scroll region within it, this content area. And this is a really, really common thing to do because it makes for this really nice interface, right? Because your layout stays there, your header stays there, your search button stays there, field stays there. So this is a very, very common thing to do. The problem is by default, a browser is not going to restore the scroll position when you move back and forth in history on a scroll region like this. It's just not what it does. It will do it on the document, but not on a scroll region. So I wanted to have an answer for this with Inertia because I feel like maintaining scroll position as you go back and forth in history is a really important thing to do. So I'm going to show you how easy this is to do. So let's go down to the bottom of this layout file that we have, and we're going to go to this overflow Y auto spot here. This is on the main div, so that's what caused it to be a scrollable area. And we're just going to define this as a scroll region. So this is what Inertia looks for. You just add an attribute scroll-region to tag it as a scrollable area. So now if we go back to the dashboard, we hit refresh, we go to the users page, we scroll the bottom, and now if we go to the dashboard and hit back, it automatically restores our scroll position back to the bottom. In fact, if we were to go to the dashboard and maybe go to a different page entirely, now we're on the Inertia site, hit back again, it again restores the scroll position. And that's because it's doing this by saving the horizontal and vertical scroll position into the history state, which is maintained even if you leave the Inertia website and come back. So it makes it just this, if you had to do this by yourself, it would be really, really annoying, but Inertia just makes that super easy for you to do. You don't even have to think about it. All you need to do is mark it as a scroll region and you can move on. In fact, you can even have more than one scroll region on the page. All right, so that's scroll regions. Now I want to look at a kind of another cool feature kind of related to the layout, and that is persistent layouts. So persistent layouts are another really, really key feature of building single page applications. So a persistent layout is something that doesn't, some part of the layout that doesn't change as you navigate from one page to another. Now, if you're building a page that does full page reloads, you basically can't do that. It's not possible because it's re-rendering the whole page every single time. But with Inertia, because the view instance is being maintained and because we're only updating the page, we can technically keep part of the layout from re-rendering. So it does require a little change to the app that we built here, but let me show you kind of an example of this. Imagine you have maybe a podcast app or maybe some type of music app where you have this little player along the bottom, right? And maybe somebody can hit play and listen to a podcast, or maybe they can hit play and listen to some music while they kind of browse through your application. So I've set this up and I'm going to hit play. I'm hoping you guys will hear the audio, and I'm hoping it's not going to be too crazy loud. I'm just going to set the audio nice and low because I think it might come through heavy. But I'm going to hit play here. We're on the users page. Okay, it's playing. I'm hoping you all are hearing that. Hoping you can hear me as well. So now we're going to go to the dashboard page. And you notice the music stopped, right? So if we hit play again, that's loud. Yep. Okay. And go to the users page again, it stops. So that's not what we want. This is what you would get in an app that does full page reload. So let's fix this. So Inertia has a story for persistent layouts. So let's go in here. And the problem right now is because all our page components have this layout component that wraps them. And even though the layout is on the outside of the page component itself, the page content is within it, it's technically a child of the page component. And we can see this. So if we go into our View Dev Tools and we go over to Inertia here and we look at this index, we can see the layout is a child of the index component. And the problem there, and the same if we go to the dashboard, right? It's a child of the dashboard component. And the problem there is it means that when Inertia dynamically swaps out the one page component with a new one, because it's a child, that component gets re-rendered and we lose it. So there's a really easy solution for this in Inertia, and that's called persistent layout. So let's update this. Let's change this layout to just a div. And then we're going to add this layout property on our view component, and we're just going to give it the layout component. This is literally all we need to do to enable persistent layouts. And we need to do the same thing on our other page component. So I'm going to do that here, our user index page, and I'm going to just layout equals layout. And now if I've done this correctly, and we go to the dashboard here, and we hit refresh to make sure that's reloaded, we can already tell something's different here. Because if we look now in our View Dev Tools, we can see the layout is now a parent of the dashboard, so of the page component. So that's a good sign. So now let's try, hit this music again. I'm going to set it at a reasonable volume, and I can hit play. All right, and now if I go to the users page, that keeps playing. We'll go back. So we've now got our persistent layout, and our little audio player keeps working, right? And we can even go back and forth in history, and it keeps working. So that's persistent layout, something that's very easily done with Inertia.js that comes basically for free with the framework, and you basically just have to mark layout, that layout file, and pass through your page or your layout component, and Inertia takes care of the rest for you. Okay, so I have one last thing I want to cover here. I think we are pretty good for time. I think I have about 5-10 minutes left. So hopefully this is enough to get through this last piece, which is about forms. Okay, so forms are probably my favorite thing about Inertia. So what I want to do is I want to go to the users page here, and I got to move this. I want to create this create user page here, and we're going to create a form that allows you to create a user. We're going to create this form in kind of the standard idiomatic Inertia way. So let's go to our routes file, our web file, and let's create two new endpoints. One to create the user, which is going to be the create method on the users controller, and one to store it, which is going to be a post request, and that's going to be in the store method. So now let's go to our users controller again, and just add that. We're going to just return an Inertia response here, and that is going to take users/create. And now what we need to do is actually create that page component. So hit save here, create.view. All right, and I'm going to grab another stub that I created, and I'm going to paste that in, and I'm going to just go to this page now and make sure that this actually shows up. All right, cool. We have our page component. That's working. Great. So let's take a look at this component briefly here for a second. This is, again, a very standard Vue component. We have a form in here that has a submit handler, prevents the default form submission, preventing the full page reload. We have some V models in here on the inputs for the name, the email, and the role. Name, email, role. So again, pretty standard stuff. A button to submit the form. And we have some reactive data for the form. So form, name, email, role. And then we have our submit handler. So this is almost like no different than if you were to build with a non-Inertia app. This is kind of just standard Vue stuff here. However, the handler is what's going to be really unique. So typically with Inertia, typically with a non-Inertia site, you might use Fetch or you might use Axios XHR to submit this down and then wait for the promise to resolve and then check the response and see if there was errors. And if there was errors, display the errors. And if there was no errors, maybe redirect somewhere else because the user was created successfully. With Inertia, it's a lot simpler. You literally just do this.inertia.post. So here's the thing, with Inertia in single page mode, you don't only make requests by creating links, you can also make them programmatically. So we're gonna just post to the /users page and we're gonna pass through the form data, this.form. Okay, so that's literally all we need to do in the create Vue component to get this post to submit down to that controller. So now let's go to the store endpoint and actually write this code. We're gonna say user create. And then in here, we're gonna say request validate. And then in here, we're gonna say the name is required and the email is required and it also has to be a valid email and the role is required and it must be in owner, admin, or member, okay? So this is pretty standard Laravel controller code where you have some validation that validates. If it's successful, it's going to return it back so the user will get created. If it's not successful, it's going to throw a validation exception and Laravel is going to handle that. So check this out. Let's go the unhappy path first here. So if we go in here and we look at the response here, look at the request, and we hit create now, we end up right back on the create page. So we can see that we're getting the response back. So that page was submitted, the form was submitted, and we ended up back with a create page. So what's happening? Laravel ran the validation rules here. They failed and it redirected back to the page that sent it, which was the user create page. So it goes and returns an Inertia response because it lands back here, which returns user/create. But then those errors, just like they would be passed back to like your blade view in the errors variable, they're passed to Inertia as props. So now we have errors, the email field is required, the name field is required, the role field is required. So that all just happened automatically. And this page component actually didn't change at all. So automatically, so if I were to fill in one form, you'll see here, like it still maintains that. So we didn't have to repopulate on the error or anything. And now if we look at the errors, we'll see that we only have 2 errors, email and role. So what happens is these come as props and they're made available as props, just like any other data that comes from the controller that you can then use in your page component. So let's actually do that. Let's add a new prop and we're gonna call that errors. And that's going to be an object. And then up in our UI here, all we need to do is output that. So we'll just say div and we'll say, actually, no, let's start with vif errors.name. And then we'll do class equals margin top 1, text red, maybe 600, text small, and maybe font medium, something like that, okay? All right, and then we'll actually output the error, which is going to be errors.name, and we'll grab the first one because this is an array. I'm gonna copy that, and I'm gonna paste it here for the email, and I'm gonna paste it for the role as well. All right, so now if I've done this correctly, reload this page, looks like I broke something, cannot read name of undefined. Uh-oh, that's not good. What did I do wrong? Props, I do this all the time. I forget the S's. Okay, that should fix it. Reboot, yep, there we go. Okay, now if I hit this, boom, we're getting our error messages. I messed up the email one too. This is, yep, sure enough I did, okay. This is a problem when you try to talk too fast and go too fast. You know, you make mistakes. Haste is waste. All right, try this again. All right, now we're getting our 3 error messages. So just think of how easy this is. We submit this down with Inertia as a post request. It goes, the validation fails. it redirects us back to the create page. That Inertia response, so it's an Ajax request that's redirecting. It comes back to the client side. Inertia says, hey, we're still on the create user page, but wait, something's changed. I have these error props available now. And since the props are reactive, all we have to do is check in our view for those errors, and they automatically get displayed because it's all reactive. And this is the same in Vue and React and also Svelte. So it's just so flipping easy to deal with errors with Inertia. I just, whatever, I get excited about it because I just think it's awesome. Okay, so that's the unhappy path, which I say is a pretty happy path in a way. So we have to do the same thing now for if a user is successfully created. So maybe what you've done here in the past is you've returned a user here, some JSON, and then here you check for that and whatever else. Think about how you would do this if it was just like a classic server-side form submission. What you'd be more likely to do is redirect to some other page in your app. So we're going to redirect back to the user's endpoint if the user is successfully created. When we do this, it's going to go and it's going to load the index page. It's going to reload the users from the database and return those users and the user/index page property name or page component name back to Inertia. So if I do this right, let's try it out here. So Jonathan, just hit enter, make sure that's working. Yep. Okay. So Jonathan at Reinink.ca, and my role, I'm going to make myself the owner. So if I done this right, we're going to hit create here and we're going to end up on the user index page. Boom. That's exactly where we end up. And if we go to the bottom of the page here it is. And that's again, because we submitted this post down, we created the user in the store method. When the user was successfully created, we then redirected to the index. And this is all happening as an Inertia request. This is all happening as Ajax. This is coming back to Inertia, and it's dynamically swapping out the create page with the index page. So that just gives you an idea how nice it is to work with forms with Inertia. So I'm basically out of time here. So I'm going to show you one last little quick feature. Ian, I will not be long. So the last thing I want to show you is just a little pet peeve of mine that I see all the time in web apps where you do something like this. You go and fill in your name, you fill in your email, maybe you're completing some big long form, right? And then you accidentally click away. It's like, oh shoot, I clicked away from that form after I just wrote the best bio I've ever written about myself. And then I hit back and I'm like, oh, please be there, please be there, please be there. But 9 times out of 10, it's not there, right? And that's because like this is the stuff we need to be thinking about as developers. We got to get this stuff right. We got to get these UI things right because these are things that matter to the users. And obviously right now, it totally doesn't do that. So I'm going to show you how easy Inertia actually makes this to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the create page component here, and we're going to take advantage of a feature called local state caching. And you do that by just marking this as remember. You pass it an array of values you want to remember. And in this case, we want to remember the form and all the data that ends up in that form. Now, Inertia, when we do this, it's automatically going to keep track of any values, any of those reactive data values in the form object, and it's going to save them to the history state. Meaning, so we can go in here, do Jonathan Reinink, add my info again here, and now click away. And if we hit back, it's still there. In fact, like before, we can go to a whole different website and we can come back and it's going to repopulate those values because it's saved in the history state. And your users are going to love you for this because it's going to save them from having to re-enter this stuff. Okay, so that was a really, really fast crash course of Inertia.js. Honestly, I'm super excited about this project. I'm basically working on this full time. I hope this talk was interesting and inspiring you to take a closer look at Inertia and give it a try on a project, a future project. So that's it. Thanks.
Amazing. Really, really great.